Hello, welcome heroes and villains of time. This is Vince South Bless, aka the Indigo Babies, and this is another video in my Technomancy series that at this point is just essentially me going through and breaking down what I consider the fundamentals so that I can get into more specific and technical things in the future. So the last video that I made was about the difference between holistic and quantifiable technomancy, so go and check that video out. And so after doing that video, I was like, yep, let me just keep with the basics. If I can get these out in a few videos, it will allow me to go on. So now I want to talk about technomancy as it relates to music. And so the reason why I'm picking this is because in terms of fundamentals, it doesn't really get more fundamental than that. So again, in the last video when I was talking about the difference between holistic and quantifiable technomancy, I pointed to a video that broke down what I considered quantifiable technomancy. And inside of that video, music and sound was brought up a lot. There was a phrase that I'd never heard before called techno shamanism. Now, again, so much about that video resonated with me, but one of the main things was the fact that I've always been aware that I have been raised around the techno shamans. So I haven't actually gone in, got any of the books, done any of the research yet. But again, instinctively and from what I heard, techno shamanism is the research and articulation and archetype of the Triforce, which is drugs, music, and the role of the DJ, the role of the producer, and how, so this is me now elaborating with it, but effectively, if you think about it, there's a few things that we define whole time around, and music is one of those things that we literally use as a way to carve out whole chunks of time that exists for more than a year. When people say the 80s, the 70s, without it referring to anything else, it's still like subconsciously referring to music without even necessarily it being specified. So when it comes to the influence of music, I think that it's weird. It's like on the one hand, people do give it the credence that it's worth. People, constantly say how music is an important part of their life. But say, for example, when they're talking about the influence that music like drill can have, right? Now, I'm not drill, but I do love grime, hip hop, rap, all of that kind of stuff. And there's some drill that I like. But the idea that music doesn't affect anything, at minimum, we're going to say this is not the technomancer's point of view. There is no argument to be made that music doesn't completely shape every single thing around you. Now, you can then make the argument about how music from the creator's perspective is shaped by the environment that they live. So me saying that is not to condemn any type of music that exists. But if you are going to take the stance that music and sound isn't one of the most influential things, then again, let's just say that that's not the technomancer's perspective. Now, in this conversation about holistic versus quantifiable technomancy, I think music and sound sits in that liminal. Because on the one hand, like I was saying in this previous video that I was watching, you can really specify exactly what music had what influence when they were specifically dealing with shifting frequencies, the intentional opposition of types of sound with the lyrics that go onto it. You can get into all of those specifics. You can really quantify it down to times and dates and influence and see what's happening. But you can also take it from the completely holistic level. So the first thing is that this actual idea of sound, this idea of frequency and vibration, if you want to keep zooming into its origin, you're going to end up at the fundamentals of what build up this universe. So obviously we consider sound to be the frequencies that we can hear, and then we elevate it to a level and we say, okay, well, there are things that other animals can hear that are still part of that categorization that we're going to call sound. But if you take it down to its fundamentals of being frequency and vibration, then you can make the scientific argument that light and anything else which you consider an interaction. So for one thing to collide with something else, whether that's photon on surfaces, whether that's, you know, more stable geometry, molecules and like that, bounces off other things. The idea of vibration is the same set of sciences that are used for describing sound and music. So that's why when it comes down to a technomancy, a influence, a manifesting perspective, everything actually is a vibration. In that sense, every movable component in the universe uses some sort of vibration to make the forces directional, you know, to actually have the influence itself. So let's just say, for argument's sake, that when a tree falls over and there's no one else to hear it, even if it's a dead tree, that it still makes a sound. Let's assume that that's the case. It's still from a sentient organic perspective, you always have to put energy into directing where the force goes. And so in that sense, you can kind of almost like the shift from sound to music, but not quite that. That's not what I'm quite... So what I'm basically saying is that if sound is the idea of vibration, then every single movement... So for me to move my hand, there's a hierarchy of directional forces that start off within calculations and a set of physical decisions that then vibrate and are passed on in a relay until they end up with physical movement happening. So with that, I want to get to the next fundamental bit, and I won't stay on this for too long because this will be a whole next video. But from my perspective, what I'm considering the Technomancer's perspective is the fact that everything at its basis is a form of magnetism. So that's kind of like the stage behind sound. But once you understand that everything is just a form of magnetism, then you can come to a set of imagery, a way of thinking, a mindset that the physical universe itself is derived by sound. So that's to say that you have a magnetic sea, and within that magnetic sea, resonant vibrations. So vibrations over vibrations through vibrations collapse and create physical objects by multiple vibrations working in tandem. So this is one way of looking at how physicality itself manifests. You know, they say in the holy books, first there was the Word and the Word was God. I think that's how it goes. Yeah, I think something similar. You know, first there was the word, and the word was maths. And so in this ocean of magnetism, you then have a vibration, but that vibration then forms artificial slash perceivable slash interactable quantifications of this magnetism. And so then out of that quantifying, you get numbers, then numbers, geometry, and then so on into the universe that we are now. So this is all to say that when it comes to technomancy, obviously in this video, I want to go into many actual technical things, and I'll start that off now. So first of all, let me show you this. Here we have my holographic looking glass from Looking Glass Factory. Let me just click on it. Cool. So as you can see here, just got some. Oh, I need to like actually not click off it. So yeah. So we got a little something going on here. This is part of what I'm calling my Technomancy suite. So this is going to be my holographic familiar. And I just, are we going to work? Yeah, we've got some changing color here. So we can change the colors. Let me get, oh, there we go. A nice little, we'll get some of that cracking. All right. So Technomancy is about the future of technology and pushing the boundaries. And I'm going to be getting into that. And like I said, after I've dealt with the foundation, I'll be able to theorize about a lot of that kind of stuff as well. But ultimately, when it comes to technomancy, a lot of the greatest inventions have already happened because they're all to do with music. They're all to do with sound. Again, I've been into tech my whole life. I've actually been coding for 7 years. And sound is still one of the most nuts things as it relates to what technology can do. When you actually understand that how magnets are used to transfer sound from one place to another, and obviously the capabilities that we've got now in communication to make that happen almost instantly, it's still one of the biggest technological feats. In my last video about holistic and quantifiable technomancy, you would have seen me make the analogy about the knife, the pen, and the wand. And so I could consider that the fundamentals of technomancy, inventions, that kind of stuff. But another way to think about it in terms of influence is the drum, the horn, and the triangle. So that is that sound when you pressurize the skins, when you have that film and you send it, the projection, the effect of the spiral, the phis and pies, and what you can do with sound when you spin it off, and the ability to make things louder with sound. And then the triangle, which is just like the sound of other things hitting other things, so like specifically metal. If you consider the influence that has in human life, again, like I said in my last video, it's all science, art and magic. So a lot of people appreciate the artistry and the science of it. But if you look at what it does psychologically to us, so if you were to ask somebody to try and explain with no magical, no spiritual, no, inherently psychological terminology, why is a drum so important in a war? Why are you at such a tactically superior advantage if you have a drum inside of war? Why would, in a war, somebody be there with the weapons and your role be just as valuable with the drum? So I understand that now in the modern warfare, the drum's not there. But guess what is there? An earpiece, so that you can get sound and so that you can get communication. It's one of the most critical things. So that's one aspect of the psychology. Then, like I was saying before about the techno shamanism, if you look at how people's personalities and how the whole life courses may be dictated around a 5 to 10 year period, experiencing a particular type of sound in particular types of environments, and how that shapes. If you look at what the internet has provided and the fact that there was no other cycle that was going to happen apart from the popularity of podcasts and the revert back to sound. And this is on top of the fact that every social media platform, though the inception was definitely about the written word. So if we say that the communication aspect of the internet was definitely driven by the spells, that was the written word, obviously going from the code all the way to the forums and the boards that people were writing in, right? That is definitely the glue of how it came together. But if you look at the viral nature of social media, this is still something which is driven by music, in terms of, you know, classic pop star, rap star, hood famous, you know, festival favorite. So all the different types of fame that you can have surrounding music, that's still one of the major glues that kind of keeps the whole thing together. And if you look at how TikTok managed to integrate the 1 minute audio samples, so now even if it's not famous music, we're still getting these new soundtracks of life, like these new sounds that to be fair, quite a lot of them are old sounds, but like, you know, you watch a conspiracy video, it's got that tune going on. You watch two people pranking each other, it's got these particular tunes going on. So when it comes to the futuristic aspect of technomancy, so this is to say that no matter what age you were born in, the technomancer is the person who's on the fringe of the capabilities of the technologies and, you know, how they all run. But it's still like all of it's still and not going to be based around sound, but we can get used to the fact that I can hold 1 million tracks on one hard drive and I can play them anywhere. But for all of the different bits of technology that get created, if people just had to pick one, Sound of Music is going to end up being that thing which takes you from, you know, out in the wilderness to feeling like, you know, that there's some kind of genius line that you come from. I'm just talking about, you know, you can be out in the wilderness saying that you're going to experience the rugged nature of nature, right? But one phone with one thing to play music is just going to completely light up your experience in a completely different way. So, you know, even in those circumstances where a lighter might be considered ingenious, right? A lighter is one of the best inventions in the world. But what it would take for you to recreate the usefulness of a lighter out in the wilderness, if you took an old school Walkman, like an old school boombox, and had speakers, if you think about what it would take to train to create the instruments, like it's always like light years ahead, even though we've already established it. Another example, I think in 2014 was when I first tried virtual reality. So at the time I got a sponsorship, like a grant from a company called O2 Telefonica. And they usually run these hackathons out in South America, but they did one in London. So I went down there and it was sick. There was a lot of like international hackers there, just, you know, more of a like a hackathon than hackers, right? And in there they had the Oculus thing, and I looked at it as a bit. Remember being in the queue, thinking to myself, "Oh, I meditate and all of this kind of stuff. This thing isn't going to affect me." I went and I used it, and it had like N64 graphics on there, and it was this roller coaster, and the thing just got me so shit scared whilst I was in it. Like I wasn't prepared for how much my brain was going to interpret it as truth. I ended up being like this the whole time, just looking up, because it was so crazy how my body was feeling based on the visuals that it was seeing. So afterwards I was speaking to the guys who like had it and who was showing it, and he was like, quickly try this out. And basically he put the VR headset on with no sound, completely no effect. Put the sound on, brain's like, we're here. Take the sound off, completely no effect. So even when it comes to something as futuristic as, virtual reality with complete spherical perception and, a frame rate higher than 24, that's still based on the fact that sound works, And so there are deeper levels. So when you start getting into sound healing, and you start getting into specific frequencies and, wave superposition. I went to a school in place in Bristol. It was known for smoking bare weed, but Bose Higson and Paul Dirac are the alumni from my school. So I was able to pick quantum physics as a sixth former. So at 16, 17, I got to do some interesting experiments. And wave superposition, how waves collapse onto each other, and what I was saying before about how I feel like the fundamental of particle physics actually arises, either which way of how the narrative gets to this stage, every single physical component in the universe has a frequency that goes alongside of it. And when you play that frequency within proximity, you create a resonance. So you can create movement in one from the other. And so obviously all of your body is created up by an assortment of, jigsaw pieces, aka atoms and molecules, and how they all fit together. And then you end up getting particular masses and densities and what you could call quote unquote textures. From like a biological sense, the texture is like the specifics of the chemicals that build up that particular thing. And so then as you start developing, as it starts organizing, that becomes your organs. And so in the end, all of your organs do actually have a resonant frequency. It's just the science of it. And so every single one of those resonant frequencies actually has a sound that you can play that is also that resonant frequency, which will then get a rise out of your specific parts of the body. So it's like when it comes to music and when it comes to sound, there's like every level. There's the microscopic, the quantum level of how things work with sound. There's quote our neutral, natural view on it, and obviously we feel that in terms of our repulsion or our attraction to certain sounds and certain musics. Some people like fireworks, some people hate fireworks. Some people like classical, some people like rock. Some people like lyrical, some people like catchy. There's all these different directions and dimensions that you can take to appreciating sound, but the fact that you have a feeling one way or the other should give you a psychological hold onto what's playing out in the quote unquote smaller realms and the larger realms, as it relates to cosmology, because ultimately the bigger the particle, so whether you're talking human, animal, plant scale, whether you're talking atoms, molecules, quarks, and just pure rotations level, or whether you're going up and you're talking about planets and rotary systems and that kind of stuff, because sound is just vibration and frequency is always resonant with a physical object or something that is capable of making vibrations, then, you know, what is playing out in the planets is obviously too large for us to actually hear. But, you know, it's not uncommon for people to talk about those things in terms of dances. And so what I will end on is the fact that, you know, one of the core principles of the universe, I think specifically in the Hermetic principles, is this idea of rhythm. So in this dimension, effectively, when your rhythm stops, that's what we call to be dead, when you're no longer animating. Rhythm starts from how you were structured. The fractal mathematical equations that produce things like humans and trees and mountains, there is a rhythm which is encoded in them. They're encoded to have generations, and generations imply time. So this playing out of organic rhythm it's easily interruptible, proving that it's not definitive. So, you know, there are things outside of the rhythm, and maybe they're just not perceivable to us. But in this dimension that we're existing in, we have the rhythm of the sun, the moon, and all of those kind of things that creates water cycles, and then that filters all the way to the point where we can have DNA, and the way that DNA then gets encoded is all about rhythms. Because, you know, if you're a tree and this branch is going to split into these two, the algorithm that creates that split it involves time. It's about chronology. You know, it might be coded from using a different metric, so it might be trying to go towards a light, it might be going against gravity, it might be going towards a food source, or going away from something it considers poisonous, but it still denotes time. And so with time you end up getting rhythm. And so with rhythm being so fundamental to life, heartbeats, circadian rhythms, you know, synapses between neurons, this rhythm means that anything that disrupts this rhythm could be considered musical. It could be considered about it being about music. So even things that we don't consider musical instruments, there's a reason why within engineering and technology that we still call them instruments. And this is because when it comes to technomancy, when it comes to transmedia, when it comes to technology, there is a lot of things that have been created and a lot of things that will be created. But I think the most influential will always be the power of music. So, with that being said, I hope you're having a blessed day. Like and subscribe, ask any questions if you've got any, and I'll see you in the next video.